Good morning once more. Welcome to this worship service for First Parish Church of Kingston, Massachusetts. I am the Reverend Monica Jacobson Tennyson. I serve this church as its minister. I use she, her pronouns, and I am delighted you have come to join us for the service this morning. Our worship associate is Joan Thompson-Stein, and I'm going to pass it over to Joan to lead our chalice lighting.
We light our chalices today with words from Reverend Heather Januels. Our prophets died for the freedom of faith. We are here in their spirit. We are here to practice and sustain our living traditions, to light a chalice claiming for justice the heat and power of fire. In our free faith, we are here, seeking freedom from despair, the freedom to be loved ourselves, and the freedom to grow beyond imagination. We are here, gathered in the name of all, all we find holy. Let us give thanks for the gift of gathering. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joan. Our opening hymn is We Are. It was recorded this summer by the General Assembly Choir and includes as the primary song leader, Dr. Issei Barnwell of Sweet Honey in the Rock, who composed it. So I'm going to share the screen. You are invited to listen, to sing, to hum, to dance, however you are moved to engage with the music this morning.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. We are mothers of courage.
I hope that song invited you in to the spirit of worship this morning, the spirit of imagination and dreamings. And to help us imagine further, I am going to pass it over to Jen Shattuck, our Director of Family Ministry.
Good morning, all. Pardon me. So good to see you this morning, to see your smiling faces, even from afar. Always, always so glad to be here with you. So as Reverend Monica mentioned, we're talking about imagination this morning. And I want to talk to you about what it means to imagine the world that you would like to live in, and then to take steps to create that world. Believe it or not, this is a story about ambulances. In 2021, we take for granted the idea that if we or someone we know suffers an emergency, we can call an ambulance, and the paramedics that staff that ambulance will provide care until the ambulance gets to the hospital. But only about 50 years ago, ambulances didn't always respond to emergencies. In many cities, the police did, and they did not have medical training. And so an injured person might not get the care that they needed on the way to the hospital, and their injuries might worsen. This was especially true, as you might imagine, for people of color and other marginalized people. And obviously there was a real need for this system to be reimagined. But for many years, no one thought to reimagine it until in 1968, at the height of the civil rights movement, a group of doctors and concerned citizens in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, came together and asked, what if? As many of you know, during the protests of that time, during the fight for justice for Black Americans, many people were injured. And this group of doctors and citizens thought, what if we could train ordinary citizens to provide medical care to anyone who needed it? What if we created an ambulance service specifically to respond to the needs of those people who are most in need of care in neighborhoods whose needs have often been forgotten and ignored? And what if this service was staffed by the people who lived in the neighborhoods, so that the people who were receiving care were cared for by people that they knew and trusted? So that is exactly what this group of citizens and doctors did. They formed the Freedom House ambulance service, which was staffed entirely by Black men and served at first the segregated neighborhoods of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But it didn't stop there. The Freedom House ambulance service soon had enough EMTs to respond to emergencies in many, many other neighborhoods of the city. And it meant that all of the citizens of Pittsburgh benefited from this service. It worked so well and so many people benefited from it that it became a national model for EMT services and ambulance services, which is why we have them nationwide today. By reimagining a way to meet a specific need in their own community, Freedom House changed the way that our entire country meets the needs of our people. And it makes me wonder, and perhaps you wonder too, what needs reimagining now? What needs could we meet, and what change could we make just by asking, what if? And we'll hear more about this later from Reverend Monica in our sermon.
Thank you, Jen. We have a reading now, and I will invite Joan to share it.
This is from Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown, who is a Black author, social justice facilitator, healer, and doula. We are in an imagination battle. Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and Renisha McBride and so many others are dead because in some white imagination, they were dangerous. And that imagination is so respected that those who kill based on an imagined, racialized fear of Black people are rarely held accountable. Imagination has people thinking they can go from being poor to a millionaire as part of a shared American dream. Imagination turns brown bombers into terrorists and white bombers into mentally ill victims. Imagination gives us borders, gives us superiority, gives us race as an indicator of capability. I often feel I am trapped inside someone else's imagination, and I must engage my own imagination in order to break free. All of this imagining in the poverty of our current system is heightened because of scarcity economics. There isn't enough, so we need to hoard, enclose, divide, fence up, and prioritize resources and people. We have to imagine beyond those fears. We have to ideate, imagine, and conceive together. We must imagine a new world that transitions ideologies and norms so that no one sees Black people as murderers or brown people as terrorists and aliens, but all of us as potential cultural and economic innovators. This is a time travel exercise for the heart. This is collaborative ideation. What are the ideas that will liberate all of us? I think it is healing behavior to look at something so broken and see the possibility and wholeness in it. That's how I work as a healer. When a body is between my hands, I let the wholeness pour through. We are all healers too. We are creating possibilities because we are seeing a future full of wholeness.
Thank you, Joan. In the spirit of calling each other into that future, we're going to share in singing another hymn, which Tom Agello recorded for us. We are going to sing, "Come and Go With Me to That Land." As always, you are invited to sing, to hum, to listen, to clap, to dance, whatever is right for you this morning.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
Such a fabulous song to sing when we are calling each other towards something. And I appreciate how Adrienne Maree Brown calls us to see the world and to understand how our imaginations shape it. Now, she says we are in an imagination battle, and this catches me up short a little bit because for the last 4 years or so, I have been trying to remove violent and militarized metaphors from my language. I read a piece from the author Ursula Le Guin in 2016 in which she said, Americans are given to naming enemies and declaring righteous war against them. Throughout our history, we have declared that Indians are the enemy, socialism is the enemy, cancer is the enemy, Muslims are the enemy, sugar is the enemy. We don't support education. We declare a war on illiteracy. We make war on drugs, war on Vietnam, war on Iraq, war on obesity, war on terror, war on poverty. We see death, which she describes as the terms on which we have life. We see death as an enemy that must be defeated at all costs. Defeat for the enemy, victory for us, and aggression as the means to that end. This obsessive metaphor is used even by those who know that aggressive war offers no solution and has no end but desolation. I will try never to use the metaphor of war where it doesn't belong, she wrote, because I think it has come to shape our thinking and dominate our minds so that we tend to see the destructive force of aggression as the only way to meet any challenge. I want to find a better way. What we imagine matters. Ursula Le Guin tells us clearly how these metaphors shape the way we engage the world, the way we ask what if, the way we think about what is possible. And still, sometimes battle is the appropriate metaphor, especially when we are talking about actual violent consequences and how we might shift those. So today I want us to turn from those violent metaphors toward imagining the better world that each and every one of us is called to help build. First off, think about your experiences with imagination and with encountering people or situations. Brene Brown, a white sociologist and speaker who has written many, many books about the experience of being human, talks about the practice of identifying the story that you are telling yourself. She writes about her experience swimming across a lake with her husband. And as they swam, they were far apart in the lake, and she called back to him, and he didn't answer her. And she says, I began to tell myself a story that he was no longer interested in me, that he was pulling away from our marriage, that I had grown unattractive in middle age, and that everything was falling apart because he didn't answer. I kept calling to him and he didn't answer and he didn't answer. And finally, when we got back to shore, I stomped over and I said, Well, same to you, buddy. She says, I told myself this story. I imagined this complete explanation for what I was experiencing. And when she actually later said to her husband, hey, what was happening for you when I was calling to you across the lake? He said, oh, were you calling to me? There was an eel nibbling on my foot and it was freaking me out and I didn't hear you at all. So Brene Brown says from this experience, she began to learn to say, the story I am telling myself is this, but that is not the only story. What other stories might we tell about these circumstances? And if you practice saying, this is the story I am telling myself, and here are 2 or 3 other stories I can tell, you can begin to open up your imagination and move beyond one interpretation of what is happening in that moment. This is important because so often we have been taught to have limited imagination about what is possible. Would you have guessed before this morning that EMTs and paramedics as a profession were invented in the 1960s, the way Jen told us? Can you imagine a time when there wasn't any sort of mobile medical help and people sort of shrugged and said, well, that's just the way it is? And yet a community imagined what was needed and then created it. For those of us who are white, we have most often been taught that limited imagination. Often we have been taught fragile narratives of the world. It has to be exactly this way, and anything else is just impossible. We have to see ourselves in a particular way, and we can't open up to other things. For those of us who are white, often we have been taught that we have to feel safe all the time, and we cannot imagine that we could move into some discomfort and find growth on the other side. This is part of what Adrienne Maree Brown points to, the way our limited imagination shapes the world around us in ways that are not life-giving, not for Black and brown Americans and not for white Americans either, not for any of us in our national life. So life-giving imagination is what we are each invited to move toward. We saw a beautiful example in the presidential inauguration on Wednesday, when the inaugural poet Amanda Gorman read her piece. She mentioned in interviews later that she has a mantra she says to herself before each time that she speaks. She says that as often as possible, she says her mantra out loud, but in some cases, for example, when there are Secret Service agents nearby who might be made nervous by a poet muttering to herself, she simply says it in her head. Her mantra is, I am the daughter of Black writers who are descended from freedom fighters who broke the chains, who changed the world. They call me. She uses her imagination to find herself in the line of her ancestors and to call herself into the future. Now, I admit I wanted to share part of her poem, and then I decided that rather than me reading you a part of her poem, the best thing would be to use the magic of the internet so that you can hear Amanda Gorman read once more in her own words this amazing poem. So I'm going to share screen so we can all enjoy that, and then we will return to the sermon. My apologies for the ad.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild reconcile and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
So that's a whole sermon right there. And we hardly need anything else. However, I want to lift up one other teacher in addition to Amanda Gorman's words. So this summer I read the book My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. Resmaa Menakem is a therapist, a scholar of trauma and cultural somatics, and a Black American who lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Cultural somatics means the way that our culture influences how we live in our bodies, because we know that how we live in our bodies influences what we are able to imagine about the world. In this book, Menakem focuses on work for Black folks, work for white folks, and work for people serving as police officers who might be Black or white or have other racial identities. He is interested in the three cultures, Black culture, white culture, and police culture, because in each case we can be boxed in by a culture that is not life-giving. Now, much attention has been given in our country lately to the ways in which the dominant cultures and the police cultures may be dangerous to Black folks and to other people of color. And the place that we have not yet turned as much attention is the question of what are we to do to create life-giving white cultures, to imagine what that might look like. A few years ago, back when dinner parties were still a thing that could happen, I was at a dinner party talking with another white woman who does a lot of racial justice and racial equity work. And we got to talking about this question, what does a life-giving white culture look like? She said, it's really hard to imagine when so much of the lens we bring is to talk about the ways in which the dominant culture is harmful, is damaging, is limiting. How are we to turn our attention from that to the creation of something positive and life-giving? And this is one of the tasks that Resmaa Menakem gives to white Americans. He says it is important to use our imagination to create positive cultures to move toward. Now, he's very clear. As a Black man, he is not going to imagine a culture for white folks, because true cultural expression comes from within a community rather than being borrowed or taken from another community. But he does give us a signpost. He says, for a sane culture to take hold and prosper, there needs to be more than just an emphasis on the individual and individual achievement. There needs to be an equal emphasis on cooperation and the collective good. And I think we have seen in our country the importance of turning toward cooperation and the collective good in these trying times, but also in all the times to come. So as we are part of this work, it is important for us to share what inspires us. And here is one place I am finding inspiration for life-giving white culture. It's a song called Tend This Flame, written by a UU minister, the Reverend Christopher Watkins Lamb, who serves as music minister at Foothills UU Church in Fort Collins, Colorado. His musical name is Crispy Watkins, and he plays with a group called the Crack Willows. Now, the crack willow, in case you don't know, and I didn't know, I had to look it up. The crack willow is a species of willow tree, also called the brittle willow. It grows alongside streams and rivers, and it gets its name because when the wind blows, sometimes the branches snap with an audible sound, they crack. And when a branch breaks off, It gets carried along down the river until eventually it lodges in the bank of the river and forms a new tree. So even in this name that might make us giggle a little, as we say, crack willows, we see a metaphor that points to the persistence of life and helps us imagine ways to build more possibility, even in what feels like a time of breaking. So I'm going to share this song. It's also our offertory music for today, which means that I want to let you know that, as ever, information about giving to our offering is available in your email order of service. Acts of generosity are another part of creating life-giving culture, practicing life-giving culture, and sustaining our momentum toward a better world for all of us. You are invited to practice generosity today, to notice how it feels to imagine your gifts making a difference, and to know that this practice is one small piece of moving toward more and more cooperation and collective good. Please know that what you give today will be most gratefully received. There is a link in the chat box now to the website for Crispy Watkins and the Crack Willows in case you would like to see more about them after the service. For now, I invite you to share this song.
I was born to tend this flame. Ancestors danced and sang. What seeds now must I sow? Sow my learning in the ground, spark of spirit all around. What makes my heart so low? Oh, my love, it's time to know. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my love, it's time to know. When sickness is our health, when murder is our wealth, what makes to heal a soul? Oh, my love, it's time to know. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my love, it's time to know. The flag that makes me white takes brown and black lives. Where must my privilege go? Oh, my love, it's time to know. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my love, it's time to know. I was born to link this chain, roll the clouds and make it rain. What anchor must I hold? Oh, my love, it's time to know.
My gratitude to Crispy Watkins and to everyone who is helping to create life-giving possibilities to move toward, and to all those throughout history who have imagined ways that the world could be better for all of us. I am going to pass it over to Joan with our chalice extinguishing words.
We extinguish our chalices today with this poetry from Reverend Alex Klingenberg. This imagination of mine is not meant for catastrophe. It's meant for slow mornings and bright eyes that twinkle with the light of exploding stars. So I'm just going to keep on writing love poems because love is what I know how to do.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, everyone, for being present for this service. I'm going to stop our recording so that we can have a chance to share joys and sorrows with each other.